All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Living the Dream podcast. Today on the show, we have Danielle Orsino, who is a competitive martial artist and a cosplayer nurse turned fantasy author. Danielle, how you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, ready to rock.
Of course, thanks for coming on the show, and we like to jump right in. So if you could start with just telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you like to do for fun, that'd be great.
Well, as you said, I'm a competitive martial artist. I retired after 2008 after I won the silver medal for the WKA World Championships for Team USA. Then I went into nursing. Yeah, yeah, slid that one in there. You see, I tucked that one back pocket.
Oh my gosh.
Then I went into nursing. You know, after you beat them up, you got to patch them up. And from there, I met a patient who inspired me to write a fantasy novel. And when I'm not doing all of that, I'm out on the Comic Con circuit and I'm cosplaying.
Wow, that was a whirlwind of
Yeah.
epic life experiences that you just went through. So tell us a little bit more about you're not just a competitive martial artist. You were like peak martial artist competition back in
Yeah. Uh,
2008. Is that right?
that was my last. That I went to the World Championships. Then I had been competing for almost half my life. I competed up and down the East Coast. From Northeast Karate Championships to you name it, Rhode Island, wherever I was on the circuit. Doing forms, point sparring, continuous matches everywhere. NASCA, all the
So,
martial artists out there will know NASCA, the NASCA circuit, ISKA, all of it. So yes,
so
I
you're
was a
really
form
well
girl.
known in the space.
I was at one time, when the Mouse and all the Christine Bannon Rodriguez was big. I was coming in at the tail end of their stuff. When Team Paul Mitchell had just started, that was like the team to be on. Everybody like looked up to like Pedro Xavier, all those guys. That was like Chris Casamassa. They were like, oh my God, that's what you wanted. I was coming in just as that was blowing up. Nobody had heard of like Paul Mitchell, the hair guy. People were like, they have a karate team. Now everybody on the circuit knows Team Paul Mitchell. That's, everything.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in when they were just really getting it together.
I gotcha. I gotcha. And then you went from competitive martial arts to being a nurse. Did you already have the education or did you go back to school?
I went back to school. I had thought, I always kind of thought maybe I'd wind up in healthcare, but I wasn't 100% sure. And then, with martial arts, you kind of figure, oh, I'll go into personal training. Maybe I'll open up my own school, which I did personal training on the side. You just kind of, when you're an athlete, you just wind up there. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
like somebody kind of slips you the card and is like, here's the key, go. It's something you fall into, just
Yeah.
kind of get there. And so I was doing that, but I wanted something more stable because it's still disposable income when somebody gets a personal trainer. Needed something more stable. So I wound up going back to school and going into nursing, but I knew I wanted more. So I started prepping for physician assistant school and nurse practitioning school to get in the cycle. And that's where things went left.
I gotcha. And by went left, you mean you became a fantasy author.
Yes. Yeah, totally off the beaten path. Yeah, not something that I was like, oh, one day I'll do this. No, it was like, the universe was like, hey, here's that roadblock. There you go. And I wound up in authorship.
I gotcha. So are you still nursing? Are you a full-time author now? How's that working?
I'm full-time author. I also work for Four Horsemen Publications, which is my publisher. I do some side work as well for them. But no, I'm just writing now and trying to make, if you're gonna hustle, hustle.
There
That's
we
kind
go.
of my feel. Like if I'm gonna do this, let's do this. So I'm in it. I'm in it to win it.
I bet. That is awesome. That is awesome. And so your day to day now looks like doing a little bit of side work for your publication
Mhm.
company, but then mostly just writing.
Yeah, just trying to get this whole brand. It's funny that now authorship is a brand because I guess everything's a brand now. But yeah, it's like getting the whole Fae, Birth of the Fae brand together, whether it's, getting whatever the next appearance is, because now you got to have a banner. So if you have a banner, does it match the logo? Who's on it? All that
Uh-huh.
stuff. It's like, it's not just, oh, I'm going to sit and write. Let's do that. It's getting the appearance together. I work with a fellow author, C.R. Rice, who's a phenomenal dystopian like YA author. Her and I get together, and then we kind of go out together when we do our appearances. So we have that, and then we plan. So I'm usually talking to her, like figuring out what the next step are, because you need a partner in the hustle. You can't do it
Yeah.
alone anymore. That doesn't happen. So we plan together on like what the next step is, and
Mm.
then you're writing. You're figuring out the next book, because the books, it's kind of like, I think the readers have gotten used to Netflix. You can binge. So you
Yep.
can't release one book a year. Nobody, everybody's like, yeah, okay, anyway, next. You're not
Uh-huh.
George R. R. Martin in this crap anymore. That's
Uh-huh.
not working. So the books have to come out. I try to release two a year so everybody can kind of get into it. So I have book six comes out June 16th. I've written for volume two, three are done already. So right now, I'm currently writing book 10.
Wow. That is amazing.
So
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm in.
that's a grind.
Yeah, I'm in deep. I'm in
Well,
deep in the Fae world.
tell us a little bit more. We'll jump into the books after this question, but a little bit more
Mhm.
about your motivation. What really gets you up and keeps you going every day?
This is going to sound really, sappy and whatever. My puppies have a lot to do with it. My two little dogs,
Yep.
Carlos and Penelope, they have a lot to do with it. Besides being characters in the books, they are actually characters. Carlos is Los, the chameleon dragon. Penelope is Lady Penelope, the white deer. She comes in later. They're a big factor for me because obviously they're muses, but I'd like to eventually have a rescue society for animals, for puppies, because I fell for Carlos when I met him in a breeder showroom. Fell for that line, hook, line, and sinker.
Uh-huh.
Uh, you know, and then I saw how it really went down, and Penelope was a rescue dog. So once I kind of saw that side of things, I wanted to really bring some awareness to it. And so they're a big motivation to eventually get to that point where the books are selling so well that I can take a portion of the proceeds and start donating it to smaller rescue societies that don't get the attention that the bigger ones do, and eventually have my own. So that's a big motivation for me.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Well, there you go. So your puppies and then getting the rescue society up and going because of how
Mm-hmm.
much you have fallen in love with your puppies and how you've seen the process.
Yeah, there. Once you see like Carlos, when I met him, like I said, I fell for the whole breeder showroom. I had no idea that it was still at the end of the day a pet store. I didn't get that. I really felt when they were like, no, 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 we're a breeder showroom and we don't do that. Carlos was from a puppy mill. After I did all the research, he was from a puppy mill. And I went back and I told them exactly what I thought of them and made it my mission to close them down. And I got real close and then did, but it was the grind of like, how do you treat these animals? They're not just a commodity. This is, I fell in love with him, and he was sick from day one. He has lymphangiectasia. He has all these things wrong, which are genetic. The way they were swindling people. I mean, even when I got him, they told me he was a teacup Yorkie. They said, oh, he'll never be more than 4 pounds. Carlos is 11 pounds. He is not a teacup Yorkie. They were starving him because he had been there 5 months. And
Mm,
for a Yorkie, that was unheard of
yeah.
because he was sick, and they were trying to swindle. And I had talked to other people who were kind of falling for the same thing. And at that point, I'm like, you can't treat animals this way.
Yeah.
It was just going against me. So I just had to put a stop to it. When we met Penelope, her mother was part of a Westminster dog line. And basically, she got knocked up by, by a dachshund. Penelope's a Chihuahua. Well, she's a Chiweenie, go figure that one. But the mother got knocked up, screwed up the bloodline, so they let her out and just got rid of her. And
Mm.
she was found. She was 10 days away from giving birth in a kill shelter, and she was 3 days away from being euthanized, pregnant. They were going to kill
Oh,
this dog, and that's where they found the mother, rescued her, and then had the litter. And I fell in love, met Penelope, and took her home. And I was like, okay, this is happening in a lot of different places. It just broke my heart. So at that point, I have these two beautiful little puppies, these two beautiful souls. And I just decided, I wanted to try to do something. So they're a big motivation for me.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Cool.
Nice. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the books now. Tell us about Fae's World.
Birth of the Fae is my series. It's a fantasy. It's considered adult, new adult. I don't have any smut, not in this one, but in volume one, it's basically about angels who cannot go home. They're here, they're sent on Earth by their creator to prep the Earth and get it ready for their creator's next great experiment. The rumor is amongst the angels that it's these things called humans, and they're kind of sent here to get it ready. So there's two sets of angels. One are the virtue angels, which are kind of like nature's angels, but they're the second, they're just below archangels. So they're considered the creator's favorites. They're a little elitist, and they're kind of like, okay, as soon as we get the planet ready, we're going home. And then there's the power brigade, which are the foot soldiers of the archangels, and they're off fighting Lucifer's war. And then one day, the gates lock. Lucifer takes his horde back, and nobody can go home, and the planet's silent. Nobody knows why. And now they're stuck here on Earth, and they have to figure out just how to remake themselves. So the story follows from Locked Out of Heaven, which is book one, what happens when you just lose your job. And if you're wrapped up, your whole identity is wrapped up in your job, what do you do with yourself? And it kind of shows the struggle of these two angel sets and what do they do. And they both have their feelings on what happened, and you see them develop, and they become our polytheistic gods and goddesses. And we see humanity come in and how they interpret them, and they become what we know as the Fae eventually. But the Fae stands for something different. It's not just fairies, it stands for the Fellowship Aegis of Earth, the Defenders of Earth. And then they become the Court of Light and Dark, and we see history take its course throughout the series.
I got you. So the first book or a couple books don't even have humans in them yet.
We see the humans in Locked Out of Heaven. We see the humans about halfway through as primitive humans coming face to face with these amazing creatures who can control nature. And so they become your first primitive gods and goddesses. The Fae do not set out to be that. The humans just take that on and decide, oh, if you can control wind, if you can do this, you must be a god. So the humans give it over to them. And then the Fae realize, well, human worship gives us power. Let's do this. And they decide, we're going to treat them very well. You know, Queen Aurora decides, I'm going to nurture them. I'm going to pour all my hurt into nurturing these humans and not abandon them the way we were. And Jarvok, king of the Court of Dark, is like, okay, that's cool. But, you know, fear works just as well.
Yeah.
And so they have two very different ideas. The only thing they agree on is human worship equals power. But after a while, Jarvok's like, you know, I don't think there's enough humans for both of us. So that starts their civil war between them. But humanity still plays out. So we kind of see all of the stories of the pagan gods and goddesses up to Egyptian gods and goddesses of how they fought were really Fae wars going on and how that plays into humanity.
I gotcha. And so was the inspiration for this just that you're really into the kind of history of all of those god and goddesses wars and stuff, or was there a different inspiration?
Originally, this story came out of my mouth while I was talking to a patient. I did not sit there and like, oh, I'm going to plan this out. Here we go, guys. No, I was talking to a patient. He needed a distraction while in an IV chair. And I was telling this off the top of my head. It wasn't, I would love to tell you this was a plot or pantser move. No, this was me just talking to him and like throwing stuff out there and seeing what stuck. That was it.
Yeah.
Once I sat down to write it, most of it was already orally told. And then I was like, okay, now I got to like make it stick. So when I sat down in one of it, I pulled out like certain Egyptian things because I was just like, okay, we're going to take this incident, you know, that I knew. And I'm like, cool, slap it on. That works. You know, it was more that stuff. It wasn't like, yes, I'm going to sit and research. I researched later and was like, cool, there really were virtue angels. Nice job, Danielle. Like, you know, there really were nature angels. I got that one. You know, that was, you know, there was no such thing as power brigade angels. I made that up. But there were some things that I was kind of close on that I'm like, okay, that works. And then I really started delving into research of, you know, Christian hierarchy and angels and things like that. And then kind of like put the icing on the cake, so to speak. Some of it, yeah, you know, like I knew biblical events, like we all did. You know, there were some things that I was like, well, I know the Red Sea parted. Let's throw that in there. You know, let's make that a Fae battle. Yay. But when
Yeah,
I told it, I was just pulling stuff. it,
there we
it
go.
was just serendipity. That's it.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
that's
It's such a
all it
refreshing
was.
answer because I feel like a lot of times, I feel like it's almost more of a entrepreneurial take on writing than a like artistic take. Like it has its artistic components, but I feel like you were like telling the story and then you were like, well, I'm just gonna write it now. And then you were writing it, and then as the process got going, you really start to feel you start to do some more research and put the icing on and stuff, which is where a lot more of the art comes in. But I feel like in the beginning it was a lot of like, I'm just gonna do it. And then
Oh
you
yeah,
just did
it
it.
was like roll the dice and go. It was
Yep.
like it was just like the roulette wheel spun, and we were like, hopefully this works. It was just that's where it went. When I, as a series continued, like when I got to Thine Eyes of Mercy, which takes place in Tudor times, I did the research then
Mhm.
because at that point I didn't know much about Tudor England. I'm like, I saw some TV shows,
Yeah.
but that was about all I got. Jonathan Rhys Meyers was all I knew about King Henry VIII. And I'm
uh,
thinking that might not be exactly the way it went down. I don't know. So at that point, I dove into research hard. I took a Tudor etiquette class. I learned everything I could. I went as far as I wrote book two. I went back and wrote it completely in Old English, and my editor threw it out. She was like, "Nobody can read this, Danielle." She's
oh
like, "If I see Prithee one more time, I'm going to pull my hair out." And I'm like,
wow.
"Oh, but it makes it so so unique and it's authentic." She's like, "No, nobody's going to sit here through 200 pages of thee, thou, thy, Prithee, prithee." No, she's like, "I get what you were going for, but no." And I was like, "Oh my god," like I
Yeah.
had spent so much time and I really researched, and she was like, "No, you can have a couple thys, a couple thous. I'll give you a thee, and I'll give you privy. That's it." She's
Yeah.
like, "Cut it. It's got to go." And I was like, "Okay." When it came to research, I did a lot of research on my dragons. Those took up the most. That was everything to me, was getting the dragons right. But initially, no, this was a total blow on the dice, roll it, and just crush your fingers and be like, "Okay, hope this works." And that's where I went. And to this day, I'm not a pantser, a plotter. As CR would tell me, I'm a chaos writer. I just start writing and we throw it up in the air
There we go.
and see what happens. Even for volume two, which takes place in the 21st century, like modern time, my patient who knows more about the government and stuff like that, when he was reading it, he was like, "Danielle, why is this gun in there?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's the only gun I know." He's like, "It's a Russian gun." He's like, "Honey, nobody uses these guns nowadays." I'm like, "I don't know. I was watching a TV show and that's what they said." And he's like,
Yeah.
"No, no, no, you can't." He's like, "If somebody holds a gun sideways in the CIA," he's like, I'm no." He's like, "That's not how it works." I'm like, "Oh, they don't do that." He's like, "No, nobody does that." He's like,
Yeah.
"Change it, And I'm like, okay." Like it was one of those where I'm like, I'm just going by what I see. He's like, "Let me read volume two." He's like, "Please."
Mhm.
He's like, "So I can just there's some things we got to correct in here." I'm like, "Sure, cool, like whatever." I've been watching Supernatural way too much. He's like, "Yes, yes, you have." He's like, "The badges don't look like that." I'm like, "Cool, cool." So
Yeah.
some stuff I'll research hard, and then other stuff I'm like, let's see,
Well, tell me
whatever
tell me about
happens.
the dragons research because I'm just so curious.
The dragons are fantasy vernacular. Like everybody expects a dragon. If you're gonna write a high fantasy book, a dragon is expected to happen. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
So I did not want to be. I thought about it like this: if I was gonna be on MythBusters, I don't want to be busted. I want to be plausible. I don't have
Mhm.
to be confirmed, but plausible. That's how I kind of went into it. So I looked at the dragons I was going to have, and I'm like, okay, I got to have a fire breather, but I wanted fire, ice, and acid. Those were like the three because I figured I'm going to take it from an elemental standpoint. So I was like, I don't want them to be the size of 747s. That's not going to work. So I went and I spoke to a mechanical engineer at Westchester Community College, and then I spoke to a physics professor, and I went to my vet, and I sat down with him, and I'm like, if I want to make a dragon, at that point I remember taking his glasses off and went, oh boy, because
Yeah.
I was giving him whacked out questions, and I'm like, if I wanted to make, and I showed him, and I said, could I start at the digestive system? And he kind of looked at me and he went, that's interesting. And I researched the bacteria, and I told him, okay, here's my bacteria. This is what I want to do. And I built them from the inside out. And I explained to him, like, here's what I want to do. This is how I see it. And he was like, this isn't bad. He's like, it's whacked out, but it's not bad. He's like, so we went through each dragon. I explained it. Then I went back to the mechanical engineering professor at Westchester, explained to him how I wanted my dragons to fly. And I said, I want it based off the albatross. I want him to glide. I don't want him taking off like Superman. I want him to jump off a high point and then catch an updraft and glide and then fly from there. And he was like, it's doable. And so my dragons are about the size 16 to 20 feet. They can carry 1 to 2 Fae max, and that's it. And then we built it. He actually made it his midterm exam for his students to get the dragons to fly. Is it plausible? Is it not? We had, I think, 3 groups that were able to make it happen. From there, I spoke to a dragon illustrator. Her name is Pandy Van, and she's absolutely amazing. We went through that, and then we started building the dragons. So we went from the inside out to the wingspan, and we got our 3 dragons down to, my fire breathers have vesicles on each side. So it holds, each gas bladder. We got down to the composition. And so we were able to figure out, like a fireplace billow, it compresses, it goes through, and then the back teeth click, and they're covered in flint rock. That creates a spark, and then it shoots the fire out. So it was, how the fire, the mouth is covered at a certain scale. So it's more like a shark scale, identical. So they don't burn themselves. That creates the fire, and then they fan back out to allow the vesicles to reinflate. For the acid breathers, they have 2 stomachs. It's more like, your Komodo dragons with hollow teeth. So they have hydrochloric acid, but then they have royal acid in a fistula under the tongue that retracts and extends. That's how they spit. So we went through that. With my ice breathers, they have cartilage tusks that controls the liquid ice. So tighter it is, the more stream. And we went back and forth and were able to figure it out. So it was a lot of research. It was probably about 9 months worth of research before I could actually say, these dragons can do it. Like, I'm happy with it, down to membranes over their eyes, the way sharks have them. So they could still see. So when they jump, the membranes are transparent. So nothing gets in their eyes, but they can see where they're going when they lift off or when they jump down and then catch their current. So we went through a lot of that to say, okay, they're not magical. Like, I hate that. I hate when you look at a dragon and people are like, they're just magical. It just happens. I'm like, no, they're not magical. And then I gave them, an actual society and a system, because I didn't want them to be weapons of mass destruction. Because I hate that when dragons it just goes and blows everything up, but you never know why, or somebody's pet. I wasn't having an Aragon, anything like it needed to have an actual reason for being there. And so we worked on that. And then I have my Dragon Society. So they're there in the Fae. They live in the Fae world. They're friends with the Dark Fae. They have an agreement. But, at any time, the dragons could be like, screw off, I'm going to do this. But they have this arrangement, and I made sure they're their own people. And that's where we went with it.
That is epic, and I'm so glad I asked.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is honestly so impressive. I feel like you should license that out or something. Like, it's so like
we're working on that. We're working on it. We have I did a novella just about the dragons. where they have there's a dragon game. Uh, with the dragons and the Dark Fae are very close, and there's an elite fighting group within the Dark Fae, kind of like what we would call our Navy SEALs,
Hmm.
and they want to get to that. You can either be a Blaze Battalion or the Acid Assault or the Ice Invaders, and it's based off almost like a martial art tournament and a capture the flag game, and you kind of see it from the dragon perspective, and you get a feel for what the dragon society is like. So anybody who wants to really know the dragons, Fire Ice Acid would be the novella to read. But I've had a couple people be like, this should be a video game now, and someone read it, and now we're working with Meldiverse where you can actually adopt your own dragon, and you'll get an AR dragon of Los. It comes out in a couple weeks actually, and you can have your own Los, and eventually we'll be adding dragons to that, and capturing the egg that goes with it and things like that. But so we're working with the dragons and making the dragons bigger in eventually in the AR world. But for right now, you can soon adopt your own Los, and he's the only chameleon dragon there, and kind of test out my dragons.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, that is so cool. And so I just feel like the world building is so intense. How long did it take to get all those like if you went down to like the membranes on the eyes for the dragon, how much in detail did you go for the rest of the world? Does that question make sense?
Yes. I have an author index that has everything. That as I was writing the story, I'd go back and like write something down on the author index
Mhm.
of just, it was down to the sigils. I had to have sigils because I thought that made sense. Like they wouldn't, they don't write ABC down. It was like they'd work in sigils because of magic and things like that. All the sacred items, all the armor. I just kept, as I kept writing, putting that aside to keep the world building going. At the time, I didn't know I was world building. Once again, I'm not a trained author, so I didn't know this was world building. I just thought everybody did this because I kind of took it from a cosplaying standpoint. Like, you got to know what you're wearing before you show up at the party. So I was
Yeah.
making it more from that perspective. There's a tremendous amount of crystals. I did my research. I talked a lot to Jamie from Enchanting Earth, who has a crystal shop, and she kind of filled in some of the gaps. When I was making the Dark Fate armor, we went with black kyanite because I was like, oh, it'll cleanse the aura, it'll do this, and she was like, no, you're right on that. Like that's keep working with that. The angelite discs, all of that, I didn't know was world building. I just thought, like, doesn't everybody do this? Like,
Yeah.
isn't that what you do? Because
Hmm.
also I'm a comic book geek, so a lot of those things were just ingrained. So I went with it, thinking everybody does this. But I just kept it in the author index, down to etiquette. If you pass a drink to the left for the Fae, that's like a disrespectful movement. Like, I will not drink this, and it's not nice. It's the polite, not nice. It's like a passive aggressive move. So things like that, I just thought we did, everybody did. And that's when I started dressing up like them.
Yeah.
Because as I started doing the fight scenes, I'm like, would they wear a cape? Would they not? What weapons do they use? And it kind of all just grew from there.
And so did you cosplay at all before you were writing your books, or did it start with your characters?
No, I was cosplaying way before then. I was showing up at Comic Cons dressed as Batgirl and Poison Ivy, Wonder Woman, Catwoman, Harley. I was always cosplaying, so that was always there.
Mm.
I just took advantage of it once I started writing, because I thought I needed to know, kind of an end of mole moment. No capes. Would they wear a cape? Would they not wear a cape? Would you get it pulled? Does it make sense? Because when I fight, I would be wearing a uniform.
Yeah.
So does it make sense to wear a cape? Because you always see it like on Game of Thrones, or you'd see it in these fantasy things, and I'm like, how the heck are they fighting with a cape?
Uh-huh.
I can't even fight with a ponytail sometimes. How are you fighting with a cape? And that's when I started like really thinking, would they originally, when I wrote the Power Brigade, I wrote that they all had to have short hair because it's a pain in the neck to fight with long hair. I don't care what
Yeah.
anybody says. I know I would have to stick when I wore a helmet in sparring, my ponytail would come out of it. I can tell you, I whipped myself in the eyes a couple times when I would spin, and I'd be like, my eyes are watering, dumb move, but I couldn't get all my hair under my helmet. So
Yeah.
I started really thinking, would they wear a braid? Well, would it be a French braid because then it wouldn't whip around? Like those are the things that I started thinking about. So it made sense to just cosplay and see.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Well, there we go. That's awesome. You're it's so intriguing how like deep you've like gone in. You've just spent so much time and effort. I just respect it so much. And I'm like, I can't wait to see the movies when they come out. But I'll be buying the books in the meantime, for sure. That's epic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Uh how long are your books on average? Are they typically about 200 pages? Or are you writing 700-page novels?
No, I don't write no 700-page novels. I'm a gateway drug into the fantasy world because I'm intimidated by big books.
Yeah.
I look at it as, look, I've read Mists of Avalon, which is like that. I mean, it's a huge, thick book.
Yeah.
And I've read Lord of the Rings and all that. But nowadays, I think people's attention span is a lot smaller.
Yeah.
We can all agree with that. But I think it tends to close out a certain audience when you look at a book like that. It's also really expensive and people are spending their hard-earned cash. I don't want somebody spending $50 on a book,
Yeah.
because one, they're going to be mad if it doesn't go the way they want it to,
Facts.
So I like to give you smaller books that I can also pump out and not make you wait. But I like smaller books because you can pick it up, put it down, and not get lost. Like, what page was I on? And then you're looking at it going, oh my God, I have 400 pages left. It doesn't matter how much you love it.
Yeah.
So I go smaller. I go about, 200, maybe I'm 250 in some places. But, it's bite size. It's a beach read. It's a plane ride. It's something that you can always come back to and get lost for a little while. And
Yeah.
that's how I kind of do it.
For sure. Well, there we go. Well, let's go ahead and jump into your dreams and goals now. What's your vision for your book series and just your life?
I'd love to see the first volume made into an anime. I think it just, that's
You like
to
anime?
me like, yeah, I just think, that's kind of where it goes to me. That's where I see it. That's where I'd like it to go. I'd love to see it a graphic novel, that kind of world for me is where I would eventually like to see it. Look, if somebody came to me tomorrow and was like, "We're going to make it into a Netflix series, live action," I wouldn't be like, "No, please, animation." No, I'd be like, "Okay, let's sign the papers. Where are we going?"
Yeah.
But I've already written a script for animation because I had some interest. But that's I see it animation, so that's where I really like it to be. I want to keep writing as long as I can pump out quality. Then I just want to keep writing and keep exploring the Fae world. And eventually, yeah, I'd love to have a rescue society, based on the books a little bit, like, Wards of the Fae, and be able to take some proceeds from the books and bring more attention to what's going on with, puppies and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And so would you ever see yourself getting into a whole nother world with a whole nother series of books once you kind of finish the Fae world?
Uh, I, I I wouldn't say no. I have some ideas for some other things. I think right now I'm just so entrenched in the Fae. It's hard to say no because volume two, I have characters that I really love, especially Graham and Morgan, who started this whole thing. And Graham is the literary persona of my patient that inspired everything. So I can't say no to Graham right now.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's no reason why I wouldn't write something else.
I got you.
I'm totally open.
I got you. Okay, I have to ask you, what are some of your favorite anime?
You know what? And I know people are gonna yell at me for this, but I do love Castlevania, and some people are like, "That's not really anime," but I do love it, and I own the original Ranma One Half movie that came out, that came to the U.S. I still have the original VHS,
Hmm.
and people are just like Ranma One Half, and I'm like, "Look, you just got to know it to love it," but I still love Ranma One Half, and that will always hold a special place for me personally, and that's really one of my favorite all time is Rama One Half.
I got you. I don't know either of those.
My
I'm
God,
also
Rama One Half.
I will say I'm not a huge like anime, so I really love the shonen anime that are so
Mm-hmm.
mainstream and popular. I know
Yep.
those pretty well, but anything outside of those kind of 20 to 30 titles, I'm not really well acquainted with. So
Ramen one half is old. Like there's probably somebody out there who will be like, "Oh my god," screaming it, and then everybody else will be like, "What the hell is she talking about?" But yeah,
I gotcha.
it's good.
I gotcha. Well, for dreams and goals, we got Rescue Society for puppies, see the first volume made
Mhm.
into an anime, and then keep writing for as long as you can pump out quality.
You got it.
Anything else you want to add to that, or we good to go?
Um, I do need to go to Loch Ness just once and see the Loch Ness monster. I'm a Nessie fan.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah, Nessie
Awesome. Well,
fan.
what are the top 1 to 2 skills that you need to develop right now to make these dreams and goals come true?
I definitely need more patience because I want it to happen all right now.
Yep.
That's probably one of my biggest things is patience. And in the market the way it is right now, you need ingenuity. Ingenuity, you got to keep it fresh. You got to just like always find a new way to capture the audience.
Hmm. And so, is that a new way in your books and in the writing, or a new way in the marketing of your books and like when you go cosplay?
It's marketing. Everything is marketing nowadays. You're writing, it's hard to say, but there's always an audience for you somewhere. But capturing that audience and keeping their attention, that's where it can get difficult. So
Hmm.
the ingenuity is part of it, but still, there's a lot of white noise, and making your voice heard above it can be very, very difficult because there's new books out every day. So why should they read yours? And then
Yeah.
when you say fantasy, they're like, ugh. Everybody goes to Game of Thrones. They go to Harry Potter. They go to Sarah J. Maas. And then you're sitting there going, no, 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 I'm different. I'm different. And they're like, yeah, we've heard this before. So it's always trying to like, you don't want to yell, but you find yourself yelling. So
Yeah.
it is hard.
I gotcha. Have you ever heard of Russell Brunson?
It sounds familiar, but I can't say yes, I know him from whatever.
I don't know how much his work would apply to fantasy authors because he's more like business marketing, but from what it sounds like, it is just business marketing, just a very niche down
Yes.
version of business
Hmm.
marketing. Um, so I'm sure you could add some of his frameworks into your marketing life if you hadn't heard of him. He might be,
Hmm.
he has a couple
I'll
books.
look him up.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll check him out. Thank you.
Sure. Of course. Of course. And what are the highest impact daily actions that are going to tick the needle forward towards your dreams and goals?
I've got to keep writing. That's, one thing. I do have to just keep doing it. But I'm not sure because some of this is luck. There's a portion of this that is total luck. I just had it where I was on the Tamron Hall Show. Like out of the blue, I got an email because someone there had read my book. And then someone who I had known for years and had lost touch with happened to be a producer on the show. And it was just one of those like
Yeah.
serendipitous moments where they were just like, "Oh my god, you read that? I know her. What did you say the name?" And it was like, so I think you just have to keep grinding, like and I don't want to say that as like hustling in the sense of not sleeping or kind of feeding into that toxic attitude of but I think there's a certain amount of you've got to keep picturing what you want and speaking it out into the universe
Yeah.
and owning it a little bit, but keeping at it. You can't get discouraged by what's being shown to you right now.
Hmm.
You have to kind of think more toward the future and know this is what you want to do, so do it. And that's why I was like, I'm all in on this because if you keep one foot in both worlds, you're sending a mixed signal.
Yeah. No,
So I just have to
absolutely.
kind of stay with it.
I love it. Yeah, that consistency is key.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Awesome. What character trait do you most need to develop right now to make your dream life come true?
Patience, 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 and some more patience because I want it all now. The thing is I think as an author, and I don't know how many other authors will agree, your stuff is good. Or you're trying to think, you think it's good. You just want everybody to get it right now. You're like, why don't
Yeah.
you guys get it? Here it is, here it is. And it just doesn't work that way. You want to
Yeah.
put all your books out, you want to do it all, and it's like that's not how it works. And then you see somebody else and they're like you have to remember, nobody's an overnight sensation. Hollywood will tell you that. It doesn't work that way.
It does not.
It's nice to hear that there was some girl on a train writing a book, and the next day the wizard's out there. That's not how it went down. We all know it. But Hollywood will tell you that's what happened. It
Yeah,
didn't happen that way. So it's like you got to kind of listen to yourself and just sit back and kind of
yeah,
woosah it a little bit.
for sure, for sure. I'm curious. So I was listening to this dude. His name is Alex Hormozy, and he was talking about how in business he has this thing called customer financed acquisition, and it's like basically your cost to acquire the customer plus your cost to fulfill them. You need to like get 2 times that cost in profit from one customer in 30 days. And basically, it's just talking about the fact that if you do that, capital won't be a constraint in scaling your business. And the kind of fundamental idea of that was the person who can pay the most for the customer's attention will win in the end. And so I'm curious if there are any ways that you've seen authors or you've thought of yourself to be able to increase the amount that you pay to get attention. Because I know like book sales are what you're not like, you don't make a killing off of each book that you sell. And
No.
so you can't spend $500 to sell one book and scale that. So I'm curious if you've seen creative ways that authors have positioned themselves such that they can pay more to get somebody to buy their book, basically.
I've seen authors. Obviously, authors are more utilizing TikTok, and they're utilizing Instagram more in their social media platforms.
Yep.
I've seen them. Obviously, they hire PR firms. They do this, they do that, and everybody's got a different story of origin. And I've seen them try that. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing I've seen is, the New York Times bestseller list is a bunch of BS. That's it. What they do is, if they have a big enough publisher behind them, they buy the publisher buys a bunch of books and positions them to get on the New York Times bestseller list. And then that gets the buzz going.
Yeah.
And then people go and think, oh my God, it's a great book. I'm going to go do it. Well, if you look, there's like a little dagger by the name. It's a corporate buy-in,
Yeah.
and there's little things. So that's usually what I've seen done. And James Patterson just wrote an article about it. He did an op-ed about, the fact that like his latest book sold more than his old books, than other books, but he was still only like number 8. And he's like, but it sold more than my number ones. And he's like, the system's rigged. He's like, guys, you got to realize the system's rigged. He's like, just because 3 people, and he was saying that there's only like 3 editors or something that pick. He's like, say this doesn't mean the book is good. He's like, now of course my book's good, and he was like kind of,
Yeah.
so it's just this whole idea of an influencer or these editors saying this book is good doesn't mean it. I think that's kind of still the hardest thing for all of us, especially indie authors or these mid-sized published authors like myself, are trying to get over the hump of just, we're here, we're good. Because if you go into Barnes and Noble right now, and Barnes and Noble is trying to change, they've actually come out, and the new CEO has said, we want people to come in and ask for books. We want authors to walk in with their one sheets and say, here I am, I want to be in your store, and we will order it. Yeah, I've gone into a couple Barnes and Nobles who were like, oh, you're print on demand, aren't you sweet? Oh my God, look at you. Yeah, no. And
Yeah.
I'm like, but this is your corporate policy says I should be walking in here and they're like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's uh-huh. Do you see Cassandra Clare? Do you see Game of Thrones? That's our fantasy. And I've witnessed like a bunch of people being like, it's the same books. Do they have anybody new?
Yeah.
So it's so weird that we're like still facing this, that who should dictate what we want to read, like the public. So I still think there's such a problem that as authors, we're trying to once again yell above that white noise and say, we're here. There's a bunch of us out there. I think we still haven't found a way, and there's no way to pay for it because, trust me, the mid-sized publishers are not taking $20,000 ads out in People magazine as a remnant to be like, go buy this book, because then they can only pick one author. If they've
Yeah.
got 100 authors, that one author they pick, what's going to happen? Better than 99, we're rising up.
Yeah.
we're rising up real quick.
Yeah,
So it's like it's a catch-22.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Have you ever seen authors build like paid communities around their lore or around their literature? Like, is that something that's been done in the world before or the space? I can't see a way to do it, but I figured I'd ask.
I think we're all a lot of us are figuring out, to license the IP. If
Hmm.
you can find somebody who wants to get in on you at the ground floor, there's more of that happening, I
I
think,
got
right
you.
now, where Discord and things like that are kind of opening up the idea for role playing games and things like that, where before it was just Dungeons and Dragons and like certain, only certain IPs could do that.
Hmm.
Now there is more of an opportunity for smaller authors to kind of start doing that, which is getting us discovered. Like Meldiverse with Los is a way for me to kind of get in there, and they're taking the chance on me as an author that's not on the New York Times bestseller list. So things like that, I think authors are also starting to figure out to come together.
Yeah.
Before it was like, even when CR Rice and I get together, people are so blown away that two female fantasy authors are pairing up. They stop and ask us all the time. They're like, but you two are fantasy. And she's like, I'm dystopian YA, she's adult fantasy. And they're like, but you guys, like, the twain shall never meet. And we're like, why can't we pair up? And they're still like, it's so weird. And we just laugh because we're like, I mean, we'll do interviews together and people are like, it's so odd, to the point where we're going to start doing more stuff together. And we tell people, just wait and see what we got planned now, because they're so blown away that two authors could get along in fantasy. Because
Hmm.
before, that was unheard of. You did not partner up with someone in your genre. You kept like
Really?
your ideas here, their ideas there. And now we're like, let's do a crossover, where we're discussing doing a crossover between our books.
Which would be
Because,
epic.
yeah, we're just like, why don't we just do that? They do it in comics. Why don't we do it? And she was like, great idea. Let's do it. And people are like, you're going to do that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so now we're even discussing possibly doing a documentary together to show like this is how the world works, because you're only seeing people once they've hit the top of the mountain. Like you see a documentary on J.K. Rowling or Steven Spielberg, even like you see these, like when he is his thing that just won the Oscar. You see these people once they've made it, and they're looking down at all of us like, it was so hard. Oh my God, this is my childhood. And you're like, okay, with your 5 mansions and your
Uh-huh.
Rolls Royces and everything, now you're going to tell me how hard it is.
Yeah.
I want to see you climbing the mountain and then falling down a couple times. That's what I want to see. That's more interesting to me.
Yeah.
I want to see somebody who we don't know if they're going to make it. That's the story I want, because that's relatable. I don't want to see Stephen King sitting in his log cabin with Butler, you know,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
where he's already got like 5 books that anybody's going to take. Like, they don't even have to read them. They're just like, Stephen King, okay, here's your check.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
want to see somebody who's like, are you going to finish that on time? Is anybody going to read that book? Do you have a cover? I want to see all the hustle you have to do, where you're just like, I have to walk into Barnes and Nobles with my one sheet right now, and there's a chance they're going to tell me go F myself. There's a
Mm.
very, I want the camera to follow you in when you go up shaking to that manager and you're like, hi, my name is, and my publisher sent me here, that's the stuff I want to see.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm more interested in those kind of stories right now. And maybe it's just because I'm an author, but I think anybody feels that way.
Hmm.
Like, is your dream going to work?
Yeah.
So,
What would it take to highlight those stories? And side question, you
mhm.
can answer that question. And also, what would it take to like overthrow the New York Times bestsellers list as like a notable list for books? Like I feel like Oprah's list is another list that people really respect. How can you make a different list that like is reviewed by like another community of authors that stays more like focused on up and coming? You know what I mean?
um, so to answer the first question, I think to highlight those stories, I think you just have to follow, like for CR and I, we just want somebody to follow us for a certain amount, like while we're trying to reach that goal of just,
Yeah.
even if it's just a couple, like a docu series, a docudrama of just, this is what we're trying to do. We've got some plans, and we've got some cool things of how we're trying to stick out that we want to showcase just to make us a little bit different. So, we're working on that currently as I speak, just different things we're doing to showcase, because we are two different, we're in fantasy, but we are two different segments of it. And we're at two different places in our lives, and things like that. So we want to show that. And also the things we do just to as you were saying, research before. We had a discussion the other day about flying. So finally she was like, well, some of yours fly and they do this. And she was like, let's go skydiving. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't skydive, honey. I don't throw myself out of a plane. And we had a whole discussion about research, and that we finally decided we would do the indoor skydiving to really see how they fly. Like, that's the kind of stuff, we're willing to do, just because. And it wound up, I was like, you know what, it's not a bad idea, because as we thought about it, I'm like, is it cold up there? Should they be wearing and we went sideways real quick. But that's a way to highlight it. But as for the other, to get a list, it's still, I think anytime a celebrity does it, I don't think it's going to work. Look, Oprah's list is great, but it's still depending on PR. And everybody you still have to have the right publicist to get your book there. It's still going to be HarperCollins. It's still going to be Penguin. It's going to be the big three. Mm-hmm. If they got the money and you're one of those, you're still going to get on it. Same thing with Reese. I think it would take authors coming together and being like, you know what, we're going to do ours. And the books just have to be the right choice. But then you're still going to need the publicity, the marketing. You still got to get in People magazine or in Style. Like, it still has to get picked up, and it's still going to cost money. So does it mean that one of the mid-sized publishers has to put out their own list, or IBPA has to put out a list? That's kind of a question. It's just a matter of who's going to do it and where is it going to catch on. Yeah. And maybe that's it. It's like, the influencers on Instagram are like, oh, I'm going to show you the most underrated books. And then you're looking at it going, seen that. Where's the underrated books?
Yeah.
Like, give me a real underrated, like BuzzFeed. They're still getting the PR powerhouses sending them the books. Like, go and really find one, find somebody that from a book tour or something that, you really haven't heard about, or go look at, some of the book awards that are just indie people. Pick from there.
Mm-hmm.
And check it out.
All right. I got an idea. Let me know what you think. Honest feedback.
Lay it on me. Lay it on me.
So you have one of these lists, it's like the New York Times bestseller, Oprah's list, or whatever. It's made by authors for up and coming authors. And so, you need the marketing, you need the money to push the list, right? Money comes from other people's pockets. And you yourself said that as authors band together, that's where I think we can start to get more traction. So you just get as many authors as you can to put in a set amount of money. Like 100 authors put in $500 a month, 1,000 authors put in $50 a month, whatever it is, to and then you guys pick 10 of you guys or whatever, and they're like the reading committee. I don't know how those books get picked, but you have a set number of people to read. You have a set number of people to do outreach to other authors or take incoming prompts from authors. And then you have what am I missing here? You got the people reading and picking. You got the people reaching out to authors, and then you got the money to market, because each author is putting in some money. And then the way you get your money back is you have people subscribe to the list for $1 or $2 a month. And, you get it'll be a slow return. Maybe it's $5 a month, $10 a month, but there's somehow you can work out the numbers. And I'm like, if you got 1,000,
you do a book box. That's how you get your money back.
What do you mean a book box?
So once you get these people, whoever you pick on the list, these people subscribe and they get those books delivered in a book of the month box.
Boom. 100%. There you go. It looks like you're about to have to do this with 999 other authors.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. It's funny because Chelsea and I do a pop-up bookshop at like GalaxyCon, a lot of the Comic Cons where we invite authors. We do not take a portion of the proceeds at all.
Mhm.
You pay to come in. If your book is chosen, and she reads all the books. Chelsea reads every book that comes in. And when I mean every book, she reads every book that comes in. So if you apply, she reads the book. If you're accepted, you pay a fee, you come in and sell the book. And it's for authors by authors. The pop-up bookshop, we have a contract with GalaxyCon, so we do Richmond, Raleigh, Austin, and Columbus. So that's 4 places you can go. You can either send your book or show up. And she sells the books. So it's another place for you to go, but it's kind of the same what you're doing. That's what we've been discussing. And the idea we've also kicked around is, this idea of kind of bringing authors together, because you're owned by the publisher. And I don't care what anybody says, you're owned.
Yep.
And they dictate how much money you get, but like, what is it for the author? So this idea, like you're saying, of just maybe making some kind of committee where the authors are like, we're going to pick who's out there now. We're going to do something because who's doing it for us?
Yeah.
That idea. And then, a book of the month or something. So we've kicked ideas around, very similar to what you're saying, to help authors get out there, because there's a lot of self-published authors that are great. But the minute you say self-published, people are like, oh,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
oh, you're self-published.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're not self-published because they couldn't go anywhere. They're self-published by choice.
Yep.
They don't want to deal with a publisher, or they've dealt with a publisher in the past and they didn't have a good experience. So they're like, I'm not going back again.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of stigma still in the publishing world.
Yeah.
And I get it. I totally get it. I'm on my second publisher. Believe me, I get it. So, there's a lot more out there. And I think those are some of the stories that need to be told. And it's not to be negative. It's not to be a negative Nelly. It's more as a cautionary tale, because anytime I meet somebody, they're always like, I have an idea for a book. It's the first thing. I got an idea for a book. And I'm like, okay. I've always wanted to write a book. Okay. And you got to smile and go, all right.
Yeah.
And they're like, can you get me a meeting with your publisher? And it's like, have you written a book? No, not yet, but it's all up here. I got it on my Wattpad. And I'm like, okay. I got the synopsis. I'm like, but you have to write it.
Yep.
So I think there is a place to hear, this is how you write, or watch somebody go through it so they can go, oh, because everybody thinks once they write the book, the job is done. Writing the book is a thumbnail compared to the rest of the body.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, it's your arm. That's it. The rest is marketing. The rest is showing up. And then you got to do book 2, because nobody wants one book.
Yeah.
You got to do book 2, people. That's it. You got to have a series, because that's where you're making your money. And I'm making it off. Anybody who's like, oh, my first book, and then I made $1 million. They are lying to you.
Yeah.
In a major way. Nobody cares about your first book. They'll care about your first book after you have 6.
Yep.
That's when they care about your first book. And then you're going to hate your first book. You're going to hate it. Because then by book 6, you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm such a better writer. What the hell was I thinking in book 1? Trust me, it's like your yearbook picture. The picture you thought you looked so fine in when you were in high school, and you were like, that perm is the best idea ever. And then you're going to go back and look at it and go, oh my God, what was I thinking? That one. That's book 1.
Yeah.
Trust me on that.
Well, there we go. There we go. Well, Danielle, that's all we have for you. Usually we have a couple more questions, but we've already kind of hit our hour mark. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Is there anything else you want to chat about before we sign off?
No, all I can say is that everybody can hit me up on Instagram at Birth of the Fae _novel. And then if they want to check out the books, it's birthofthefae.com, or wherever books are sold, Birth of the Fae series, and check out meldiverse.com and adopt your own Loth.
There we go. Well, if you guys are listening to this and you loved Danielle, you loved her effort and work that she put into her books and the world building, and it intrigued you as it did me. Make sure to check it out. All the links to do so will be down in the show notes. And if you buy a copy for yourself and like it, buy another one for a friend, send it to them, and make sure to review Danielle's books online. That's review them online, Amazon.
Please review them on, if you buy them on Amazon, you can review them there. If not, Barnes and Nobles, Goodreads. But you have no idea how much reviews mean to authors. They are a lifeblood because they set the algorithm. And then if you're going to be in Raleigh, July 24th through the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, I will be at GalaxyCon at the pop-up bookshop with C.R. Rice.
There we go. When you come to Austin, you have to let me know.
I will be in Austin September. I believe Labor Day weekend we'll be there.
Sounds good. Make sure to hit me up because I'm right here in Austin. So.
Oh, you got it. I'll be there.
All righty. Sounds good. Well, Danielle, thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you on the next one. On that note, we're out.